Hey, what's up here? Chris Manning from the Locked On Cavs podcast. Evan Dameral's with me. Our producer, Jake Stevens, is with us. Going to be a fun one. Segment 1, we're going to talk about Ochai Agbaji. What skills does he have? How that's going to work. Segment 2, we're going to talk about who Ochai is competing for minutes against. And segment 3, we're going to look at the last 5, or really 6, number 14 overall picks and what that tells us about what Agbaji could do. I want to thank you, by the way, for making Locked On Cavs your first listen every day. Remember, we are free and available wherever you get your podcasts.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast.
Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. The music you heard on the way in, by the way, is from our friends at Astro Radio. Check them out on Apple Music or Spotify. I'm Chris Manning, covering the Cavs and the NBA for places like Diamond Up Rocks and Estimations for the Sword. You know Evan Damerel. He's my co-host from Facebook's Right Down Euclid. And we're going to introduce him now. It's Jake Stevens, our new producer. We're really happy to have him on. He's going to make our podcast so much better because he's actually good at audio editing, which I'm not. Jake, what's going on, buddy?
Not a whole lot. I'm really excited to be here, to be doing this.
Yeah, this is a pleasure to have you. I'm going to ask you this on the spot before we dive into this. Did you like the Agbaji pick?
I was pretty tuned out. This is the first time since LeBron's been around where I was pretty tuned out to the draft. I was really busy with work. Work has since slowed down, so I've been kind of I've been excited to jump back into the Cavs, and
that's Jake.
Listening to you guys has been helpful.
Yes, and now you're gonna have to listen to us make mistakes on the back end, which will be fun. Evan, let's dive into this. Let's dive into Ochai Agbaji, Cavs first round draft pick out of Kansas, Final Four most ascending player, all that stuff. I think there's a couple things that we can look at and say this is what he does well. This is what he structurally is good at. This is what we can expect him to. Evan, are there things that you look at his game that you can say, okay, this is what I think is going to work for him? Things that you expect him to maybe be able to contribute with right away?
I think shooting is the biggest thing, and I stress this a lot, especially when we broke down just the initial reaction to the Agbaji pick itself is he is an NBA-ready player, and like he does have a pretty predefined skill set. And at least on the offensive side of the ball, shooting is the best way he can contribute to this team right away. He did mention during like the lead up to Summer League that if the Cavs asked him to shoot double-digit three-pointers a night, I don't remember the exact number off the top of my head, but he's willing to do it to help the team succeed. And I think that's a huge win for the Cavs because they were a bottom third team in terms of three-point shooting last season. And let's be frank, Darius Garland, Kevin Love, sometimes Larry Markkanen, Jetty Osman, once in a blue moon, the random Evan Mobley three-pointer towards the end of the season, and Colin Sexton when he felt like taking a three. Like, that's not like a very solid group of three-point shooters other than Garland, Love, and then sometimes Markkanen. Like, you need more support, especially in a modern NBA setting, and especially if you're a team that wants to play with two bigs. I think more spacing is always just a welcome addition no matter what lineup you're rolling out there, and that's just like the biggest thing I think right away you'll get from Agbaji, because you saw a little bit from it in Summer League. He wasn't making a lot of them like we talked about in Wednesday's episode, but at least he was willing to keep shooting them and kind of get comfortable with shooting from a little bit more of an extended range compared to what he was shooting at in college.
I think that's right. I think that the way that he is going to come in and do stuff off of DHOs and do stuff off of pin downs and come off ball screens and really be an actual spacer teams have to acknowledge, I think that's really going to matter. I think the willingness, as you alluded to, Evan, I think is important there as well. I think the other part of this is defensively, I don't think they need him to come in and be like a generational defensive prospect. Number one, they have one of those in Evan Mobley who's gonna structurally be the defense, and I don't think Agbaji is going to be that as a prospect. What I think he's probably going to be, and what the hope for him should be, and this is what could push him to get minutes, is can he hang on ball a little bit? Can he hang off ball on shooters, on cutters, and be a really competent guy within the overall structure of the scheme? I think if the baseline of him is shooting threes, making them at like average-ish to above average-ish, he tacks some closeouts, makes some good defensive, does some good defensive work, and is like a guy that you at least feel like the baseline of his ability is there. I tend to think that is the baseline of a successful rookie year. And I'm also excited to see how this will evolve as we go. I think as this happens, we're going to see, like, do they give him more responsibility? Do they dial it back some? Like, how did this all kind of ebbs and flows over an 82-game regular season? I think will be real interesting, because this is a different kind of rookie than bringing in Evan Mobley last year. The team is better now, and he's going to be asked to not transform the team. He's asked to supplement what's there, and how JB Bickerstaff handles that, I think, will be a fascinating subplot.
I think it will be a fascinating subplot. I think how he earns minutes in this rotation is going to be on the defensive side of the ball, especially just with JB Bickerstaff running the show. And I asked JB this, when they first introduced Ochai to the media as a Cavalier for the first time, like, the versatility he possesses. Like, you can use him as a point of attack defender, you can use him as a help defender, maybe covering for some of Darius Garland's mismatches, you can use him as a switch defender with, obviously when he gains some size and it's just some natural just strength for adjusting from playing college level ball to NBA level ball. Like, there's some really multifaceted potential with him defensively. I don't think he'll ever hit like the apex of Isaac Okoro within a year or two, because Okoro just, I think, was a better built defender just physically early into his NBA career. But I think he has the potential to be multifaceted and be certainly a unique wrinkle for the Cavs on both ends of the floor, where a lot of scouts have kind of said this to me, and I think it's been reported by other people too, where Agbaji could easily ease his way into not just the Cavs, but the NBA in general, where he could be like a quality, like, hey, I want to commit my full mid-level exception to this guy, where like he's making $9 to $10 million, which that's a reference number at this point, a year, where he's just like, he gives you 3-point shooting, he gives you multifaceted, solid defense on the other end of the floor, and maybe there's something else there too, since he is a rookie, even if he's a more finished product coming out of college. But right now, just what we know about Ochai Agbaji is it's what the Cavs need, and like you said, Chris, it supplements a lot of things that they need as well: perimeter defense, 3-point shooting, athleticism, speed. Like, there's a lot of unique ways the Cavs can utilize him, and I think the luxury, at least the blessing of not making the playoffs, is you get to add a player like that on a very cheap, cost-controlled contract to kind of supplement a lot of these, I would say, glaring holes a little bit that the Cavs have at times in some spots, but also allows them to address other things in free agency, like Robin Lopez, Ricky Rubio, Raul Neto, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I think going Agbaji in the draft to fill this need and punting on trying to find your wing answer in free agency makes a ton of sense. I think the question is also, okay, what is he going to contribute in year one, which we'll kind of get at the historical aspect of that later. And in the next segment, we're gonna touch on the guys he's going to be butting up against to get some minutes. And it's not so much that he's going to, I think, eat, let's say, all of Cedi Osman's minutes. It's going to be how many does he take from each guy as we go along there. Jake, anything we missed before we go into break?
You hit all your points. I mean, he's your 10th guy on the roster, so that's pretty cool. That's not a 10th guy. Yeah.
No, I think if he's your 10th guy and that makes Cedi Osman your 11th guy, or Dylan Windler your 11th guy, I think that works. All right.
I don't think Dylan Windler is your 11th guy.
Well, here's the thing. I think that is just functionally true about the Cavs roster. They have 15 spots that are full now. We'll see what happens with Sexton. We'll see if Windler or Osman is gone when Sexton. We'll see one of them maybe is gone. Maybe it might be Windler. I also think that it's very clear that the bottom falls out on the wing much more than those other guys. And if he is your buffer between Cedi, I think that's fine. I think realistically every NBA team is going to be kind of shaky on the back end. And I think if for year one all Agbaji is somewhat interesting, competent rookie who provides you a buffer from wings that the coach does not trust, that's not a bad outcome for the 14th overall pick for a team that didn't try to take a home run swing at 14. And as we'll talk about later, there are teams that have taken some pretty massive home run swings at 14, and there are two really good players that have been taken there, two guys that have amounted to nothing, three guys that have really amounted to nothing, and then one guy where the jury is still out. So we'll dive into that. All right, after the break though, we're going to talk about the guys, including Cedi Osman, including Isaac Okoro, including Lamar Stevens, that Agbaji is going to be competing for minutes against. But first, going to tell everyone about our friends at BetOnline. BetOnline.net is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all of your betting needs. Find all of your favorite sports and events at the #1 online source for odds, lines, and games. Find reviews and news for every league, including Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA, NHL, combat sports, esports, and even golf. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for sports wagering information, from live in-game betting, scores, and podcasts. They have you covered. Head to BetOnline today or use your mobile device to learn more about the action happening today. For instance, the Cavs are -125 to win fewer than 43 games next season and -105 to win more than 43 games. There's other NBA futures for awards and Coach of the Year and all kinds of stuff there as well. All right, that's just BetOnline. That's where the game starts. Check them out today. All right, back here in Locked On Cavs, I'm Chris Manning. That's Evan Tamrill. Our producer extraordinaire Jake Stevens is with us today for the first time. All right, Evan, we have 5 guys that I've identified in our outline here that are guys that Agbaji is going to be butting up against within the wing rotation. I have not put Dylan Windler on this list. I think him and Jetty are kind of like they're the same thing. So the other guys we have here are Okoro, Lamar Stevens, Karis LeVert, Colin Sexton.
I think that's a fair list. To preface in the first segment when Chris said Dylan Windler's your 11th man, I just don't see him realistically being a part of this rotation. I just unfortunately think the ship sailed on him last year. I think you're trying to see what you had with him when you sent him down to the G League, but Dylan Windler could be in a similar vein to Lamar Stevens and Dean Wade, those guys who are your 11th, 12th, 13th man, where if you call on their number, they're not going to completely look lost on the floor, but you're not expecting too much out of them. Maybe you get a solid game from them. But in terms of guys we want to talk about, maybe just in bench players, I think Isaac Okoro is going to be the player that Agbaji pushes the most, because Okoro, we talked about this on Wednesday's episode, really does have a lot to prove in his third season, because we kind of need him to have this offensive leap. And if you're the Cavs, you say okay, well, maybe Agbaji doesn't give us the best, the top flight defense that Okoro does, but he's able to provide us something comparable to it, maybe to a lesser degree, obviously, but he provides us three-point shooting. He provides us a little bit of an offensive bump where he's actually viable on both ends of the floor instead of just one end like Isaac is currently, because teams don't respect Isaac Okoro and he's floating on the perimeter, let's be frank. But that's just kind of who I think Agbaji is really going to push the most, at least in terms of bench guys. I mean, could be dudes in the starting lineup too, but I think Okoro is going to be the biggest one that Agbaji really pushes, and he'll be competing for minutes with.
I think it starts for me with let's just say it's Jetty, because I think the first step will be,
you and I are in agreement that Jetty is going to not really be a huge factor if he's on the roster.
Yeah, but I think step one of this is saying, does Agbaji come in camp and in off-season workouts and all that stuff? This is assumes that Osman's on the roster and whatever. And then he says, okay, does he push him down the totem pole? Because I think there is some overlap in sort of what they are going to be asked. Jetty, to his credit, sometimes his detriment, it's just willing to take a bunch of threes. I think Agbaji is a little more controlled, doesn't maybe offer the same sort of wild card factor in that same way, but I think the 3-point volume is the reason you play Jetty to some degree. His 3-point shooting, despite all of the wacky on-off stuff with him and Rubio last year, really did kind of normalize last year. Agbaji, I think if he takes out him, that gets him into 10th man minutes, and we see where that goes. I think him and Lamar are a little hard to compare, because I think they play slightly different positions. I think Lamar is also a depth piece. Okoro then, I think you're right, Evan, becomes the next guy, because this is a prove-it year for Okoro. He is in year 3 of his career. He will become extension eligible next summer, and then after that, he'll theoretically get restricted free agency. So that's where they're guys that I think could kind of match each other and kind of provide different things and both be useful. I think it's just curious how they will both be deployed. Does he carve into Okoro's minute some and all that stuff? That will be telling as we go on. And if we list out the wing rotation here, not including marketing, because he's kind of the big. He's kind of a big. So you have the wings, you have LeVert, Okoro, Agbaji, Stevens. Bigs would be Allen, Mobley, Markkanen, and Kevin Love. Then you have guards, you have Garland, Sexton, and then one of Rubio or Howell and Nato. So you have 4 bigs, and Markkanen kind of obviously blends into the wings a little bit. LeVert, Okoro, Agbaji is 3. Stevens would be 4. This is going to be tight for minutes, and I think if he like takes out Jetty, like you alluded to this the other day, Evan, I think maybe like there is maybe here and there like some DNPs or something. Like I'm curious to see like how long, if it's not immediate, it takes him to like solidify himself as someone that gets actual real consistent minutes.
So to my point the other day with Agbaji getting DNP coach's decisions, I think when you look at the Cavs scenario and picking him, they had the luxury of getting this draft pick because Agbaji could be an Indiana Pacer right now, or any player that the Pacers could have taken at 14 if Cleveland made the playoffs, and we wouldn't really be having this conversation right now either. But the fact that they weren't really expecting to have him, and the fact that he's going to kind of have to earn his minutes in the rotation, also gives you the luxury of getting creative with it too, or maybe there are certain nights just matchup-wise positionally, like let's say they're playing the Sixers and they want to have an extra a big come off the end of the rotation set, and that's when you tap Robin Lopez and say, okay, Ochai, you're just not going to play tonight if they just can't find minutes for him in the rotation, or if they play like a team like Milwaukee is another example too, or they maybe need extra point guard depth and they, let's say like Ricky Rubio's in foul trouble and they say like, okay, Ochai, we have to pull your minutes back and we have to give Raul Neto some minutes instead. Like the Cavs kind of can get a little creative with this, and also maybe gives Agbaji a little bit of motivation to maybe earn those minutes a bit more too. But it also gives you that runway to let him grow, let him develop, let him get comfortable at the NBA level, so that you're not really asking too much of him. And like Chris and I have alluded to, like I don't think the Cavs are going to ask too much of him right away, especially when we talk in the next segment. We'll really sink our teeth into that discussion a little bit. But he does have something that he can give you right now, but he also has the luxury of developing and growing, so maybe he can hit another level or another potential aspect of his game that maybe none of us were aware of that he had at Kansas.
It will be interesting to see, and this leads into segment 3, like if he's good right away, if he's competent right away. Like it is clear at times when rookies are like showing you something and you believe it's going to get better, and then it's like a building block. It is clear sometimes when they're like otherworldly, and like you have like an Evan Mobley or Herb Jones that like, or Cade, that like really transcend in some way. Agbaji doesn't strike me as a guy who's necessarily going to transcend, but if he like is competent right away and is like able to give you minutes right away, that's like a win. And again, I think it seems like to some degree when they get the 14th pick and they keep it, they were able to say, hey, we're not going to play the free agency game with wings. We're just going to like take this guy we have to develop him. We have to figure it out. But like this is like more cost controlled. It makes sense in that regard. And he gives us something we didn't like. I can't think of a wing realistically that they could have been in the conversation for, whether with I mean, they use the MLE in part on Rubio. Like there's not a wing they could have gotten that I think would have maybe given them what Agbaji theoretically could, even if it's not this year. 2 years from now, 3 years from now, like I understand how we kind of end up in this kind of wing situation with Agbaji. Evan, I want to ask you one last thing before we go into break. Who do you want to see Agbaji in lineups with? Is there anyone that you're intrigued to see him play with outside of like Darius Garland?
I'd like to see him play with Evan Mobley and Jared Allen, because I talked to Matt George on Locked on Kings about this a little bit, where if you are a team that wants to go bigger like the Cavs do, you're going to need spacing, especially if Evan Mobley, like, yes, we've seen the workouts with Kevin Durant, like he's shooting three-pointers with a little more confidence, it looks a little more comfortable, a little more silkier, but playing him with Mobley, maybe Mobley, Markkanen, and Allen, like you just go super big. Like let's say you play Ricky Rubio at the point, or maybe you want to get real weird with it, and like you trust Karis LeVert enough, you play him at the point too. Like there's options and ways you could go about this where like the Cavs could get a little weird with this, but kind of provide more spacing to allow Allen and Mobley to operate even more so and just really wreak havoc on the interior. What about you?
I kind of want to see him. I kind of want to see him in Okoro because I'm a sicko and I am me. Like.
I think those two would slap together. Like that'd be a fun defensive, especially if you're a real believer in Agbaji's defensive ability.
Yeah.
Like those two could really make life frustrating for teams on the perimeter.
Like
opposing teams on the perimeter. And also for the Cavs on the perimeter if Okoro isn't hitting.
Yeah, like give me like a 5, like when Rubio's back, of like Rubio, Agbaji, Okoro, Kevin Love, and Evan Mobley at the 5. I just want to see it. Like just competency and bigness at like 3 of your positions. Evan Mobley's your alien at the 5, and then Kevin Love just gets to like bomb threes and guard like the guy who moves the least. Sounds like a win for Kevin Love to me. In all honesty.
Yeah, Yeah,
yeah,
I don't disagree with that.
Agbaji LeVert seems kind of weird to me.
You think?
Just because like LeVert does not like look for other players. Like I don't know if he's the guy that's going to maximize Agbaji off of pin downs.
No, he won't be, and I think that's maybe where you look into using more like Evan Mobley as like an offensive hub in that scenario, and LeVert is your one, quote unquote, but like he's defending a point guard, and like or Agbaji's just acting as the point of attack defender, or Okoro is in this scenario. I don't know. There's some cool stuff you could really do with him in the lineup. So
yeah, I mean, if he's competent right away, massive win for the Cavs. All right, after the break, the last 6 number 14 overall picks, a lot of whom were bad. We're going to talk about them right after this. All right, last segment, Locked On Cavs. All right, guys, I'm going to run through the last 6 14th overall picks and tell you what their numbers were, how many games they played. We did this before the draft, but we're going to do this now, I think, knowing that Agbaji is the pick. Do you guys want me to start? I'm going to let Jake pick since this is his inaugural episode. Jake, do you want me to start with 2016 and go like closer in time, or do you want me to start in 2021 and go backwards?
I think if we start with 2016, people will feel better. So let's do that.
Okay, that sounds good. That's fair with me. Okay, 2016, Denzel Valentine. Remember him? Cavs legend Denzel Valentine. Goes to the Bulls.
What's he up to these days?
He was with the. That's a good question. Being Denzel Valentine, I guess, age 23. 57 games as a rookie, 5.1 points per game, 2.6 rebounds, played almost 20 minutes a game, 17.1. Had a negative 2.3 estimated plus minus here according to the dunks and threes, plus 3 on defense, was a clear negative in offense, minus 2.6. 2017, Bam Adebayo, age 20, drafted out of Kentucky, 69 games played, 6.9 points per game, that's double nice, 5.5 rebounds. He's a positive plus 1.2 expected plus minus as a rookie, was clearly impactful from the jump, not a superstar and top 25-ish guy that he is now, but was good right away, probably the best immediate contributor of this list. Then Michael Porter Jr. is 2018 to the Nuggets. He misses his whole rookie season, obviously, but has since got paid a lot of money. It is a very key player for a Nuggets team that could make a title run this year. 2019, this is where things go downhill a little bit for the draft slot. 2019 is Romeo Langford to the Celtics. He's age 20, plays only 32 games as a rookie, 2.5 points per game, minus 4.3 expected plus minus. Very bad player. Is with the Spurs now, has not been good. 2020, Aaron Nesmith, also to the Celtics, age 21, 46 games played as a rookie, 4.7 points per game, 2.8 rebounds, a negative 3.4 expected plus minus. It's in the bottom like 20% of players in the league for that season. Bad. 2021 is really a wait and see. It's Moses Moody to the Warriors, age 19, very young, youngest guy actually taken in this slot here. 52 games played as a rookie, 4.4 points per game, 1.5 rebounds, had a negative expected plus minus of 3.4, but showed some flashes in the playoffs. I think there's some belief that he could be a guy that plays some minutes for the Warriors this year, and that like you saw enough on court that like it's going to lead to something. Agbaji, to me, guys, and Evan, we'll go to you, is I think like Valentine is weirdly the most similar comp because it is the age thing, because Abaji's 22 and Valentine is 23. The thing is that like they are just very, very different players. It is like comparing an apple to an orange, because Denzel Valentine is like came out of Michigan State as like a very bad defender and like a shot creator, and Agbaji is literally good at all of the opposite stuff. I'll link it in the show notes. I went back and read the Gavoni, Mike Schmidt's draftexpress.com draft profile on Denzel Valentine, and it was like it was like an astounding read in retrospect and also just a certain day of the internet that we don't have anymore. But this doesn't tell me anything really about Agbaji. Like, it doesn't really actually give me any information that I feel like I can use and apply it to him directly, because there's not really like an apples to apples comparison here.
They're not really. There really isn't, and I know you hate player comps in general, Chris.
Yes.
Like you're not a fan of them in general, but I think just historically speaking, just the 14th pick isn't expected to be a high impact player. And like if you're the Cavs in this scenario, we talked about this a lot during the pre-draft process. Like, you could take a safer commodity like an Ochai Agbaji, where he's a bit more NBA ready, he's a bit more seasoned, he maybe has a lower ceiling. Or we were talking about like Malachi Branham. We were talking about players like similar in that vein, where like they're going to need a little bit of a runway to develop. They're probably going to spend time in the G League because they're the 14th pick, and they're not going to really be cracking the rotation right away. But Abaji's just like an interesting case where, like you said, there's not really an easy player comp, and like Denzel Valentine sticks out in terms of age, but he's like the bizarro Denzel Valentine. Like, that's like the nicest. Or no, let me correct the record there. Denzel Valentine is the bizarro Ochai Agbaji, is what I'm going to say, because everything Valentine is what Agbaji isn't, like Chris said. And like, I think there's something there. Like a player, just in comparisons in general, like I was reading mock drafts, like a player that Agbaji got comparisons to was Jay Crowder if he bulks up a little bit, but like could be a multifaceted defender. He can be a 3-4-2 player as well. Like, he can play different spots on the floor. Like, there's some potential there, but there's not really a good way to compare it. And like a Bam Adebayo is like a huge outlier in this list, but like historically speaking, like 14 is very, very hit or miss just in general. And like, again, Moses
Michael Porter Jr. is like an outlier too, because this is
Well, Michael Porter Jr., I'm still a little hesitant on. Like, yes, he is probably going to be worth the money for the Nuggets, but the back injuries issue, any issues that come with them still scare me a little bit. And that's why he fell to 14. Like, he was a consensus like top player at first until he had those back issues in Missouri, and then his draft stock just completely cratered because of it.
Yeah. So I think the lesson here, if there is one, is that like Agbaji does not fit cleanly in these comps of what other 14th picks were. If you go back like to a very different era of the NBA, so like you get to go back to like 2010, Patrick Patterson ended up having a really nice career. Marcus Morris senior is important, was 14th next year, has had a very nice career. John Henson had a really nice career. 2012, he's the 14th overall pick. And then you get into like Shabazz Muhammad, TJ Warren, Cameron Payne, and then you're into Denzel Valentine. So like, it's really changed a little bit, maybe as some of the draft stuff has changed as we've gone on, and there's the draft is a crapshoot. It just becomes more of a crapshoot the deeper you go, and 14 is a very crapshooty pick, I think, is ultimately where we end here. And I'm curious to see just how seasoned he does look and how seasoned the Cavs do look, because I think you saw these other situations. Miami's Miami. That's kind of a different situation. The Bulls gave Bam a lot of minutes in 2016, or excuse me, Denzel Valentine a lot of minutes in 2016. But ever since Bam, Michael Porter Jr., the back stuff keeps him out for a year. It's why he fell. Evan's really good point. Number one guy in that class until his back becomes red flagged. Cavs, remember, passed on him because of the back stuff. Romeo Langford and Nesmith are like talent plays that the Celtics were going for development. Moses Moody was that for the Warriors, and he obviously saw some minutes for a team that won the title, but not significant minutes. Agbaji is sort of like more of a throwback pick in terms of, can this guy come and give us something now as we continue to develop him? But this isn't like a Nesmith or Langford thing where like there's G League minutes headed his way probably. Like, it feels more of an immediate thing than some of these other recent picks.
Yeah, I agree with that. And my only counterpoint to the Michael Porter Jr. thing is Luka Doncic was at the top of that draft. I mean, the power of hindsight, I think you take Luka, no hesitation.
Unless you're the Kings, you take Marvin Bagley.
Yeah, I mean, you can maybe make it. Yeah, I don't know, man. That's just a whiff. Like, Trae Young too is up there too. Like, I think Luka and Trae are the top two players in that class, and then maybe Ayton, if you feel comfortable with him, and then maybe a Michael Porter Jr. at that point, then SGA as well. Like, that's a really good draft class if you're looking back on it.
Yes, it is. All right, let's wrap that up here. Jake, any final thoughts about Ochai Agbaji as we wrap up this episode?
I like the spirit of what the Cavs are doing, at least. Even if no matter how it turns out, it feels like they know what they need to surround Mobley and Darius and Jarrett. So I trust Kobe. I'm cool with it. I'm excited to see it.
Cavs PR can't say we never said anything nice about them. Now that Jake said they can cut that off, and
there you go.
We'll make them like a NFT they can sell in their My Cavs locker of Jake's audio there. They're gonna get that. This is Chris just pulling an Evan and turning the crotchety dial and angst up a little bit. Evan, any final Ochai Agbaji thoughts before we get out of here? Any final thoughts on what he could contribute as rookie? I'm going to look up his rookie of the year odds, see if we can find them from BetOnline before we get out of here, actually.
I think he has like the 8th best odds last I checked. So other than that, I don't really have a ton of thoughts. I'm intrigued to see how he contributes. I think he could really push a lot of these guys in this roster in general, especially at the 2-guard spot, because I know Kobe called him a 2-guard, but like the way JB's going to utilize him will be interesting enough. But he's going to push Okoro. He's probably going to push LeVert. He's going to push Sexton as well. Like, it's going to be a cluttered training camp battle and like continuous battle throughout the season at the 2-guard spot. But it's like healthy competition. Like, that's the thing I'm going to be really watching. Like, is this healthy competition conducive to growth? And like, where does Agbaji fall amongst all this growth?
I will say this, of the guys that we can look at as far as like, what do they look like this year? He's not the number one name on my list of guys I would like to watch practice. And like, we'll never get to watch guys practice, obviously. But I would really like to see, what his what he looks like in practice against guys from the jump, because I think it would just be an interesting thing to actually see him in that context. We never get to see practice. It's like one of my biggest things I'm envious of people who cover the NFL full time is that they get to watch practice in the summer, because I think you learn stuff from it, and you just never get to see that in the NBA. And I would selfishly like to see Agbaji, like, how does he defend LeVert in practice? How does he defend Garland in practice? Like, there's just a lot of that little stuff I think will be really fascinating and help us understand where he's at as he gets going. BetOnline has him as plus 3,300 to win Rookie of the Year. Paolo has the best odds than Chet. Keegan Murray is tied with Chet at plus 400. Jabari Smith, Jaden Ivey, Benedict Mathurin, Tari Eason, Shaden Sharp, and then Ochai Agbaji. And he has the same odds as Mark Williams, the center out of Duke. So, I mean, if you feel really, really strongly about this, I guess, he feels like the exact kind of player who does not win Rookie of the Year, but, weirder things have happened. I guess Malcolm Brogdon and Michael Carter-Williams won it, so, who could say? All right, that's going to be it. We will be back on Monday. I want to thank you for making Locked On Cavs your first listen every day. This episode was produced by Jake Stevens. Jake, did this live up to all of your hopes and dreams?
I'm feeling on top of the world. I'll tell you. No, this is exciting. This is awesome. This is I've been listening since sometime in quarantine. I've listened to like hours and hours of your voice, so it's very cool to be here.
It's extremely.
Well, now you're getting paid to listen to hours and hours of our voice. So lucky you.
There you go.
This is much better. This is much better when I'll be like, Evan, I'll be at a game, and one of us will come back from like getting like water, and someone will be like, yo, I follow you on Twitter. I'm like, don't follow me on Twitter. That's an awful thing to do. Who needs to be on Twitter? This is a scary thing you're telling me as I'm trying to like wash my hands right now, child. All right. We'll be back on Monday breaking down what Isaac Okoro's offense currently is and what it would need to become for him to take some kind of a leap in year 3. We'll be joining us for that. If you want a great second listen, get up to date on the latest news and rumors of the NBA. Just 30 minutes every day with Locked On NBA. Locked On NBA is your daily NBA update in just 30 minutes. I would also suggest Locked On Browns because there's certain more Deshaun Watson stuff happening. Locked On Guardians with Tyler Freeman coming up to the bigs. A lot of stuff happening in Cleveland. Check out all of the great Locked On Cleveland podcasts and the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show as well. Make those like your 3rd, 4th, and 5th listen. Say it sounds like a good time to be. But for myself, for Evan, for Jake, this has been Locked On Cavs for Friday, August 5th. Have a great weekend. Be well, everybody.